What's up? It's Jen Brown. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to episode 3 of my crochet school series. Today we're going to work on a couple of my favorite patterns that I use all the time for stuff, things that look really pretty but aren't necessarily super complicated. The first one I'm going to show you is called the Alpine stitch. I find that this one looks really pretty for blankets, scarves. I have a tradition of making blankets for people a lot for big events in their life. We do a Christmas gift exchange every year, me and some of the ladies at work, and I've made blankets the last couple years and it's always a really big hit, but I find this one is like pretty simple to do and it looks really fantastic. I love using it on sweaters and stuff too. So I've just done this one. It doesn't really matter how many chains you do. 4, 6, 8. We'll just do 15 to round it out. I'm gonna start by doing a row of double crochets. So I've chained 3. These few stitches I do enough, or stitch patterns I guess I should say, I do enough that I remember how to do them just off the top of my head. Something I mentioned in the last video that I do, let me see if I can pull some out. That one got kind of flat. This is what we're doing today. This is the Alpine stitch and I just have a little swatch of it and a little label. Just if I want to remember what something is or if I forget how to do it, I can like just have a little swatch that if I need to undo some of it I can and rework it, or just kind of glancing at it can help sometimes. That's the test I did in the wash. Like this one with the arrows, I don't do this one enough to remember how to do it, so I would have to kind of go back and look at this if I couldn't find a pattern easily to look at. Same with like the wave stitch that I've got in a few different colors. There's actually quite a few in here. And then this is a waffle stitch that we'll be doing today as well. So that's just something I like to do. I also have test swatches of different, I also have test swatches for putting them in the wash that I would do if you're using a new type of yarn that you've planned to be able to wash that you've never done before. Just make a little swatch of it and put it through the wash. So we've got our row of double crochets. Now we're going to do a row of single crochets. These patterns that I'm showing you today all have a front and a back to them. Obviously, if you like the look of the quote-unquote back, you can make that the front. That's up to you, but these do kind of have a designated front and back. This first row that we did is the only row of double crochets we're going to be doing. We're going to now be combining that with triples and single crochets. So to make our first row of the Alpine stitch, I've chained 3. I'm going to double crochet in this first stitch. Then I'm going to triple crochet. We haven't learned how to do that yet, but if a double, you yarn over once. A triple, you yarn over twice. Then instead of going into the next stitch of this row, we're actually going to be going around this double crochet. That's called a front post triple crochet when it reaches down into the row before it. Then I'm going to yarn over it for another double crochet. I'm going to skip the one behind the front post we just did. Double crochet in the next stitch. Skip the one directly below that double crochet. Front post triple crochet. So you start to get these really long stretches. Okay, so I've gone a little bit further down the row so that you can see as we turn. Just finishing up. So this is the front of our piece. So now to go across the back, we are doing another row of single crochets. Chaining 3, and now I'm going to do the opposite. So this previous row has a double crochet there, so I will do my front post triple crochet around it. Then I will do a double crochet above the previous front post, and so on. And it's getting a little bit folded up here. I'll spread it out for you in a second so you can see. And we are just continuing to do the opposite, going back and forth between front post triple crochet and double crochets. And you can see that they start to kind of like weave together and overlap with each other. And that's how we do an alpine stitch. If you get to the end and there's no spot to do a front post, just do another double crochet. I'm doing it in this like very bright pink yarn, but I think this pattern looks really sort of like classy and elegant when you do it in maybe a little bit more muted colors, but it's just a really fun one. It works up pretty quick and it just gives like some cool texture. Okay, so for the next one, we're going to be doing the waffle stitch. I went ahead and brought us back to this point. This is that same foundation row of double crochets that I did. I've got my turning chain, flipping over. I'm going to do 2 double crochets. Then we're going to work with front posts again, but this time we are just doing a front post double crochet. Then 2 regular double crochets again. Then another front post. Two regulars, another front post, For that last one, I'll just do another standard double crochet. So these front posts are going to make the squares of our waffle stitch. So now I'm just chaining my turning chain. Now this is the back, and in order to keep these front posts kind of popped out, we're going to do the reverse. So now we're going to do 2 front post double crochets, then 1 standard, then 2 front posts, then 1 regular, we're doing the opposite of that previous row, and that's what makes the little squares of the waffle knit. This is another one that's great for blankets. I see a lot of people do this one when you're making your own washcloths. I've never done like a sweater or anything with this. I think that could be fun, but it does tend to end up being kind of thick just because it tends to just be like a little thick, extra thick, because we have this layer that's kind of popped out. So if you wanted a really chunky sweater, that would work. So now we're going back to what we did before, where we do 2 normal double crochets, then a front post, 2 regulars, then a front post, so each row that you do will be half of one of these waffle knit squares. Why am I having such trouble with these turning chains today? So this is our little waffle knit. So this one's fairly easy. All you're using is double crochets. The front post can seem kind of complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's really easy to do. That's what the back looks like. So for this pattern, this is actually one that is very easy to change and kind of make up your own version of, and that's basically what I'm showing you. This is not like a stitch pattern that I learned. This is just something I kind of made up. This is what I like to use a lot for wearables in general and sweaters, to make them look a little bit more like a store-bought knit kind of pattern. So I have my foundation chain. This is another one that it doesn't matter how long it is. I think of about 15. I added 2 more, and I'm going to do a row of half double crochets. I don't know why I like to use half double crochets so much. They're in between single crochets and double crochets, and I just think sometimes a double crochet is too open of a stitch when I'm trying to make like a cozy sweater. But you can do this with doubles, triples even, singles, whatever you want to do. Sometimes I will just go back and forth doing back loop, half double crochets like I showed in the last video, but if I want to do something a little extra fancy and give it that sort of like ribbed knit effect, I'll do this 1 row of half double crochets. Then I will do back loop only slip stitches With these, you have to be really careful not to be too tight with your gauge. You don't want to go too loose either, but you don't want the whole thing to just kind of like scrunch up. And they can be a little Slip stitches like this can be a little weird when you're working with a small project, but as it gets bigger, it's easier to hold it while you're working. Then I will go back to my half double crochets, continuing to do the back loop. And I'll just repeat that. Go back to the single, or I'll go back to the slip stitch and just repeat those 2 rows. This one I like because it requires very little thought. If I just want to like zone out and do a big block of something that looks really nice and has that sort of nice knit look to it, that gives it a little bit more texture than just something that's like plain and straight across. I will do this. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just kind of depends on what I'm in the mood for. So these are the 3 main patterns that I wanted to show you for this episode. They can really be applied to anything, and they're not too complicated to do. Honestly, most patterns aren't. Unless it's like gonna make like a bigger picture or something. But most stitch patterns that you're gonna use for like a wearable or a blanket aren't incredibly complicated. So if you like any of these, I would suggest practicing some. If you want to use one of these for the final episode, by all means. But what I'm going to be showing you is just going to be very straightforward, like nothing fancy in the stitching. For our last episode, which be on the lookout for that, I'm going to show you how to make your first wearable. It's going to be very simple. We're going to combine all the techniques that we've learned and just be the most basic sweater that you could possibly make. I think you'll be happy with how it turns out. So in the meantime, keep practicing, keep working on your gauge. That's always really important, and working on any stitches that you might like that you might want to use for that. If you like this one, feel free to subscribe. Stay on the lookout for the next video. I post videos 2 to 3 times a month and do crochet videos usually about once a month. Thanks so much for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.